Good afternoon, distinguished ambassadors, members of the diplomatic community, esteemed researchers, innovators, policymakers, and guests. So we're here for the two sessions of sewage diplomacy as a solution to costly nutrient pollution and also the risks of reactive nitrogen emissions from the e-fuels transition. So the two sessions are connected by a single challenge: pollution. Sewage diplomacy on a land poorly managed, wastewater and nutrient pollutions degrade ecosystems, threaten public health, and continue to climate impacts. Sewage diplomacy offers an innovative response, an initiative that uses wastewater management as a platform for operation, clean energy generation, and international collaboration. Rather than treating sewage as a costly problem, it applies and nutrient recovery technologies to convert wastewater into renewable energy and reusable nutrients for agriculture and other productive sectors, transforming a liability into a resource and a local challenge into an opportunity for cross-border partnership. At sea, the shipping industry faces growing pressure to reduce emissions and transition to cleaner fuels. Alternative shipping fuels represent one pathway toward a lower carbon maritime future, but the climate and ocean benefits of this transition are not guaranteed.
Thank you. Good afternoon and welcome. Welcome to Mombasa. Welcome to this session. My name is John Wesonga, and yes, yes, we welcome you here. So today's conversation will really focus on, the intersection, of three global priorities: climate action, maritime transport, and ocean health. So those are the conversations we're going to be having this afternoon. We'll have two sessions. So I think the first session, Amran, I think you've spoken to it. And the second session is really looking at, how do we, what are the risks of reactive nitrogen emissions during this, as we walk through this transition. So that's really the conversation this evening, this afternoon, leading to evening. So thank you so much for being here. Yes, and before we get into the serious conversation, please, I want you to say hi to someone. In Kenya and in Mombasa, we say, if you say mambo, yeah, you say poa. So just say, please say mambo to someone and they should say poa to you, yeah. So please say hi to someone and then we can kick off. Thank you.
So I think we're going to begin our session on sewage diplomacy. And I would like to welcome to the stage the man that began it all, Professor Mark Sutton. Now, Professor Mark Sutton is co-chair of the UNEP Global Partnership on Nutrient Management and one of the founders of Sewage Diplomacy Initiative, working closely with Global Wastewater Initiative, GWWI. He is a director of the International Nitrogen Management System, co-chair of UNECE, Task Force on Reactive Nitrogen, and a member of GEF Clean and Healthy Oceans Program and the CHO Maldives Project. So if you'd like to warmly welcome Professor Mark Sutton to the stage.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you so much, all of you, for coming in this exceptionally busy conference. And we know it is hard to carve out time to do that. So thank you for coming in person. And those of you who are around the planet, It's a pleasure to have you joining us here in Mombasa in Kenya to discuss these critical challenges. So the world and pollution. I'm going to suggest that we will probably massively fail to achieve our targets for pollution reduction by 2030. And indeed, did we do very well in meeting the Millennium Goals in 20 years ago? Answer, no. I see at least one shaking head. Not as well as we should be, far off it. And I think as a scientist who spends their time studying fluxes and flows and how to measure things and monitor things, we're often too much concerned just about the nitrogen and the phosphorus and the other nutrients, and not so much concerned enough about the economy. And so I'm going to put out there the suggestion for starting this discussion that we have to find the economic value in this story about sewage pollution if we're going to make a change. So I'm going to start with some big numbers. And the first is that the world is emitting to the air and to the water 200 million tons of nitrogen per year. I'm not going to value the phosphorus just now, but consider that added value. 200 million tons. If I put a price on that at $1 per kilogram of nitrogen as if it were fertilizer, or $3 during the Ukraine war, or $2.50 up until the Iran war, multiply the two together, I get between 200 billion US dollars and 600 billion US dollars worth of wasted nitrogen resource. We call it nitrogen waste. Now, in the past, we often thought of wastewater or municipal solid waste as waste. The waste goes in the waste basket. But we're trying to reframe that and say that the waste of resources, let's say, is not waste until it's truly wasted. And it's truly wasted when it's lost in the air and the water. So halving nitrogen waste would give us, an economic opportunity of 150 to 300 billion US dollars a year. Most of it is in agriculture, probably 70%. There's a whole other share from nitrogen oxides emissions from vehicles and shipping, of course. We'll hear more about that later. But sewage is perhaps 20%. But the interesting thing about sewage is it's very often in a pipe. And it's like right in front of you. You've got it. You could manage it. Now, the point about sewage is that expectations differ. And for a long time, we've seen sewage as something, let's say, to destroy as pollution. Let's get rid of it. We want clean water. But now in this land of high fertilizer prices, we suddenly realize, hang on a moment, we are throwing away money. Or as the farmers say in Britain, there's money in muck. Well, there's money in sewage as well. There's an opportunity there. So we had a conversation that started in UNEA 6. And it started as I sat on the table with a guy from a UN medical program. And he said, oh, you're with UNEP. Okay, very good. But I want to complain. I want to really complain because the embassy up my road, in fact, the ambassador's residence up my road is emitting raw sewage into the environment, and it really stinks. And that was the starting point, because we said, well, hang on a moment. If you are a particularly European ambassador to UNEP, United Nations Environment Programme, surely we should and could be doing better. When I challenged the embassy staff over that, a member who was seconded to UNEP said, what's the problem? That's what everybody does here. The dogs eat the solids. Well, again, I was not convinced. Now, that's what led to the discussion about sewage diplomacy. It's a bit like rough justice, the sweet and the sour together. But surely that's the stick. The stick would be, that's really bad optics if it were found out European. No, if UK did that, the UK ambassador's residence were doing that. I don't know if it is, but that's the stick. The other side of the coin is actually opportunity to be a champion, to be leading. And before we blinked and found out a bit more, we found out that one country represented here, he knows who he is, has already taken action before we even just talking about it. And we'll hear a bit more about that later on. I'm not going to steal their thunder. So there's an opportunity, either it's an embarrassment or really it's an opportunity to lead. And I think this is what we want to encourage, because think of it like the solar revolution. 20 years ago with the solar revolution, solar power was too expensive. We couldn't do it. But yet people invested, and the prices came down and down and down. And now, we are really in the solar revolution. So imagine that the nutrient revolution, recovering nutrient resources from wastewater, is part of that, and we need to encourage that revolution along. I'm going to tell you one example. Maldives, little island, 2 kilometers. We're working there, 3,000 people. Their sewage is 170 meters cubed per day. They did have soak-away systems just going into the ground, polluting the island water lens. So the government in the last 18 months gave them sewage piping. Great. But the sewage is not treated. Now a pipe goes straight onto the coral reef, raw sewage on the coral reef. This is really not good for the environment. So we're now working in a GEF project, in the Clean and Healthy Oceans Maldives project, with a Norwegian company that's going to capture that sewage, zap it with a lightning bolt made from solar power in a box, get rid of the smell, kill the microbes, and allow those nutrients and fresh water to be reused in irrigation agriculture on the island. There's a lot of steps on the way to make it happen, but the funding is there, and hopefully the box will be on the island in the next 6 months. So I'm not saying that is always the answer, but what we'd love to see is a competitive ecosystem. Imagine all those diplomatic residencies and missions competing, bringing their own national technologies, say our technology is better than yours. Well, let it be. Let them fight amongst themselves. Okay, so that's the story. We've started now this week conversation with hotels here in our ocean conference. And I found out that when Kevin and I went to see the engineer at the Paradise Hotel, apparently we were the first to have this conversation in this conference, i.e. here we are talking the ocean, but what is happening in the hotels? They're running a, let's say, 30-year-old concept, septic tank, soak away, 400 meter cubed per day in a hotel, leaking into the aquifer. The solids are taken away once every 4 months, going to be dumped in landfill. So there's a whole nutrient opportunity missed there. How can we work with in the future to transform that to a circular system? It's a challenge not just for diplomats, it's a challenge for hotels, it's a challenge for young people. That's what I think is something we really need to do to make a difference. And we'd love to hear your stories as you take those tentative steps to say, how can we transform? With that, thank you, Amran.
Thank you, Professor Mark. And I totally agree with you. Change begins with a single conversation. Next, I would like to welcome to this stage Heidi Savilli Soderberg, the Chief of Source to Sea Pollution Unit at the United Nations Environment Programme. Welcome to the stage.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone, excellencies, distinguished guests, colleagues, and friends. It's really a great pleasure to be here at this event, and I think that the title captures such a powerful idea that some of our greatest environmental challenges can also become opportunities through innovation, partnerships, and practical diplomacy. So we'll have a lot of opportunity to discuss this further. We of course know here that pollution doesn't start at the shoreline. It really begins upstream through wastewater, nutrient losses, agricultural runoff, as well as poorly managed urban systems. And it travels not only across ecosystems, but also economies and borders. So we really need a true source to sea approach, one that addresses pollution at source, but also across every stage of its lifespan, and one that brings together sectors and stakeholders around shared solutions. What's really encouraging is what we've also heard from Mark, that wastewater nutrient management is not only about reducing harm, it's really about recovering value. Wastewater has the potential to provide alternative energy to up to 500 million people and offset more than 10% of global fertilizer use. The recovered nutrients from wastewater could also offset around 13% of global fertilizer demands. So in other words, what we are treating as something wasteful or waste can also become a resource, both for food systems, for energy security, and for resilience. But to do so, we need cooperation. So ambitious action on nitrous oxide could help avoid equivalent of up to 235 billion tons of carbon dioxide emissions by 2100, while also delivering major health benefits. So if we can be smarter around the management of both nutrients and waste, then we will be able to move the needle on climate action, public health, as well as sustainable development. So this is why the initiatives such as Sewage Diplomacy matters. They show that diplomatic spaces can do more than host dialogues. They can help demonstrate solutions, connect governments, cities, scientists, communities, and other actors, including investors, around practical actions that can improve sanitation, protect marine and freshwater ecosystems, and support circular economies. So how can this sewage diplomacy support countries in addressing both environmental protection and economic development objectives at the same time? Well, if we create value, we can tackle pollution through resource efficiency, resource recovery, energy generation, and improve public health. And we have already some frameworks that we can use to build on. We have the regional seas conventions and action plans with their land-based sources of pollution protocols. These are legally binding in many regions and have set up impressive frameworks for moving forward on wastewater and nutrient-related management and issues. We also have the Global Program of Action for the Protection of the Marine Environment from Land-Based Activities, the GPA, which also provides a framework for action and has brought together multiple actors through the global partnerships on nutrients, on wastewater, and also on plastics. What's promising is that at the global level, we're also seeing developments through the UN Environment Assembly. We saw nitrogen-related resolutions, UNEA 6, also oceans and water resolutions, and more recently, sargassum. So if we can connect some of these topics, it really can emphasize and better highlight the connectivity between many of these issues and the growing recognition of the need to address land-based sources of pollution in a more integrated way. So we can turn this, through sewage diplomacy, we can turn wastewater into a driver of innovation, investment, and cooperation beyond short-term fixes and towards systemic change. If we reimagine waste as a resource and diplomacy as a platform for implementation, we can move from commitments to action and from pollution to possibility. So thank you so much, and wish you an inspiring and productive discussion.
Thank you so much, Heidi. Next, I'd like to welcome Ms. Veronica Barcia Buteres, Ambassador of Costa Rica in Kenya and a permanent representative to UNEP and UN Habitat.
Hello, good afternoon, ladies, gentlemen, distinguished guests. Before anything else, let me convey Minister Navarro's apologies for not being able to take part of this important discussion today. Due to unforeseen circumstances, she wasn't able to come, but I have the honor to deliver the remarks on her behalf. It is a pleasure to join you today to discuss an initiative that is both innovative and deeply practical, sewage diplomacy. At first glance, wastewater may seem like an unlikely subject for diplomacy. Yet this initiative challenges us to rethink that assumption. It invites us to see sewage not as waste, but as a resource, one capable of generating clean energy, recovering valued nutrients, and contributing to healthier ecosystems and communities. In Costa Rica, this perspective resonates strongly with our national approach to sustainability. We have long recognized that environmental challenges must be addressed through integrated solutions that connect public health, ecosystem protection, and climate action. Allow me to share a brief snapshot of our reality. Costa Rica currently treats between 15 and 30% of its wastewater. While this highlights an important gap, it is equally important to note that 99% 0.2% of our population has access to some form of sanitation service. This reflects decades of investment in public health and infrastructure, but also underscores the need to advance toward more comprehensive and sustainable treatment systems. Today, we are actively working to close this gap. Several ongoing projects in the country are exploring the transformation of wastewater into methane and biogas, turning a traditional environmental liability into a renewable energy asset. One key example is our water treatment project in the greater metropolitan area, supported by financing from Japan. This region concentrates approximately 60% of our population, making it a strategic priority for improving wastewater management and environmental quality. Costa Rica is globally recognized for generating nearly 100% of its electricity from renewable resources, primarily hydropower. However, this success also presents new challenges with the increasing intensity of climate variability, particularly El Niño phenomenon, which we are currently experiencing at a significant level. Our dependence on hydrological sources exposes us to risks. This is precisely why initiatives like Sewage Diplomacy are so timely. By converting wastewater into energy, we diversify our renewable energy matrix, increase resilience, and reduce greenhouse gas emissions simultaneously. In Costa Rica, this aligns directly with our national decarbonization plan and our international commitments under the Paris Agreement. But beyond technology, what makes sewage diplomacy truly powerful is its collaborative dimension. Diplomatic missions are uniquely positioned to act as living laboratories, just as our friend here in Belgium is doing. They can demonstrate practical solutions, foster partnerships, and accelerate the exchange of knowledge across borders. In doing so, they bridge policy, innovation, and implementation. For countries like Costa Rica, where environmental stewardship is cornerstone of national identity and economic strategy, this approach opens valuable opportunities. It allows us to connect our domestic efforts with global networks, learn from diverse experiences, and scale solutions more effectively. Moreover, wastewater management is not only an environmental issue. It is a public health priority, a climate action tool, and an opportunity for circular economy development. When approached through cooperation, it becomes a platform for building trust and shared progress between nations. It reminds us as well that sustainability is not achieved in isolation. It is built through partnerships, through shared challenges, and through the willingness to transform problems into opportunities. We are committed to continue this path, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, strengthening our resilience to climate change, and advancing innovative solutions in water and sanitation. We believe that even something as ordinary as wastewater can become an extraordinary economic opportunity when approached with vision and collaboration. Let us continue working together to turn these ideas into action and to demonstrate that sustainable solutions can not only protect our environment, but also strengthen the relationships between countries and communities. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for those words. So now for the real meat and potatoes, as we say in Australia, of the session, which will be our panel. So because sewage diplomacy challenges us to imagine a future in which sustainability is not only about protecting the environment, it's also about strengthening relationships, building resilience, and creating new pathways for cooperation between nations. So today we've got an extraordinary panel of experts who are going to be helping us shape this future when it comes to sewage diplomacy. So I'd like to welcome to the stage Ambassador Peter Maddens. Ambassador Peter Maddens serves as an ambassador of Belgium to Kenya. He has supported initiatives promoting sustainable development, environmental cooperation, and innovative approaches to wastewater and resource management. Thank you, Ambassador. Next, I'd like to welcome to the stage Joss Hill. Joss Hill leads the Nature Conservancy's wastewater pollution program, advancing climate resilience and ocean health by addressing sewage pollution through integrated cross-sector solutions. Her work focuses on strengthening governance, mobilizing finance, and developing scalable models to reduce wastewater impacts and support coastal communities while informing global efforts to embed wastewater into climate and ocean policy and investment frameworks. Welcome to the stage. We'd like to welcome back Professor Mark Sutton, who was the co-chair of UNEP Global Partnership on Nutrient Management and one of the founders of Sewage Diplomacy Initiative. Welcome back to the stage. And myself as the moderator for this session. Ah, it must be the wood. Right, so I guess we'll begin with the opening question, just to kind of set the stage. So sewage diplomacy challenges us to rethink wastewater, not as waste, but as a resource. So what mindset shifts are required for governments and institutions to position? And this is open to you all.
I'm really happy with that question, because one of the notes I made while listening to colleagues here and friends, it's the term wastewater. You're talking about a mind shift. I think we need to stop talking about wastewater, because you don't waste water. Let's call it used water, shall we? If you're talking about a mind shift, that's one of them. It's just the words you use. I think the words you use are important. Thank you.
Very valid point. Language does matter indeed. Any other thoughts?
I like to think of the one water framework, so similar to what you were saying, but just, sometimes we are flushing potable water down the toilets and then going through expensive processes to try and make drinking water. And so thinking about how we use water as a whole system, I think is really helpful to make us realize where we're being wasteful.
Yep. So I like Peter's suggestion. I hadn't had that before. Used water. We're definitely in the process of this, and changing mindsets takes time. What we've been doing in the UNECE, that's the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. It has a air pollution convention. It's called the Convention on Long-Range Transboundary Air Pollution. The name is too long, so just call it the Air Convention. In that, there are all these categories for inventories, and one of those categories is waste. And waste means municipal solid waste and wastewater. So we have managed to agree with the UNECE that we've rebranded that as processing of residues. It's not quite used water, but the thinking is still there. Let's not use terms of waste. And back to, I think I said it before, but I'm going to repeat it and keep repeating it. Waste is not waste until you've wasted it, until it's really gone. And when you've still got it in the hand, it's still a resource. So I'm not sure I answered your question, but that's what I want to say.
Most definitely did. I like that part about the waste.
Do you have a question for my answer?
So this question is specifically for you, Joss. So how can resource recovery from waste water or recycled water contribute simultaneously to food security, climate action, and also ecosystem restoration?
when places that have water security, where water is important for food security, for agriculture. So if we're thinking about reusing wastewater, we can have a better source for food. We can not pollute the ocean and protect fisheries and be able to get more food from the ocean as well. So, you know, I think it's, again, thinking about the one water framework, thinking about the full system. Oftentimes with our wastewater, it's really thought of in a silo, and oftentimes many countries, it's only centralized through utilities, but many places, most of the communities are actually not connected to sewers. They have individual systems, and there isn't, what I've noticed in my work is that there isn't an agency that is responsible for thinking through the solutions for all the decentralized systems and the whole, like, you know, if it's an island state, for the whole island as a whole. And so we really need to kind of bring this issue together. So we're considering the environment, how we use water, what we're polluting, the health benefits, bring it all together. We need partnerships to be able to develop resilience, kind of thinking about it from a landscape resilience perspective. So I'll end there.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Think anyone else have anything to add?
Yeah, I think what you've said about one water chimes a lot. The challenge I face is, in a sense, it's one everything. But I mean, because water interacts with climate, interacts with the air. So we work particularly on nitrogen and phosphorus. But in the case of phosphorus, it's not very volatile, so it doesn't get much into air. So phosphorus is mainly a resource issue and a wastewater issue. But nitrogen is contributing to climate change, biodiversity loss, air pollution, water pollution, and all of them. So suddenly we're in a world of how to connect all of those. I guess I'm going to see it as a Venn diagram that there's overlapping themes and they're not in competition. So we'll sell nitrogen as being an issue in water. Let's be joined up in the water. We'll sell it for joined up cycles. Let's be joined up there. And you know, whatever your passion is, there's an angle you can come in with these problems. As to dealing with everything at once, I struggle with that because I get indigestion. But I certainly buy into the idea of one, but let's say maybe we're looking at it through different windows at different times, recognizing the connections.
Fantastic. I'd also like to welcome to the stage, we've got Her Excellency Honorable Kibibi Abdullah Kamisi. So she's the Minister for Environment and Water at the County Government of Mombasa. Thought it'd be fantastic for us to also hear her thoughts and for her to join us on the panel too.
Really heavy chair.
So when it comes to so historically, wastewater or recycled water has been viewed as a costly environmental problem. So what opportunities emerge when we begin treating wastewater? And I think I'm going to change that to what was use water. I like that. I like that word a lot better. So use water as a source of energy, nutrients, and water. I think, Mark, you'd probably be able to speak a little bit more on that.
Yeah, I think I just comment about with this used water. I'm even already starting to call it pre-loved water in my mind. The new name for secondhand clothes. I think it's about getting of every part of it. So if one should make a business case for investment, we need every part of that. So we've been having conversations here with the hotels, how to reuse, repurpose, recycle the wastewater, pre-loved water from the hotel. And that means that part of the value comes from recovering nutrients, part from recovering water, part from biogas, and all of those together might make the difference. And I think that's where the economic assessment is also needed, with some investment in the first place.
And that's exactly what I did in my embassy in Nairobi. Just for information's sake, we were inspired by a hotel in Masai Mara, a small camp that had as its USP, as its unique selling proposition, the fact that it was a net zero carbon neutral safari camp, the first one in Masai Mara. And visiting that camp, I kind of thought, maybe I can try and do this with my embassy. I mean, I have an embassy, and the office and the residence are on the same plot of land, so it made it even more efficient. And within about a year or two of arriving 5 years ago myself, we actually did transform the embassy to be the first net zero embassy in Nairobi and the first net zero embassy in the Belgian diplomatic network. We have, on the energy side, all our energy is solar, obviously with batteries, but relevant to this particular session today are the three other elements of our system. One is a hydroponic vegetable and herb garden. We recycle all our water. We actually recycle it 2 or 3 times, from using the borehole water in the buildings and then cleaning it through 2 filter systems and then using it to irrigate our specifically the vegetable garden, where we recapture the water that wasn't used because it is a hydroponic garden, and the water doesn't get absorbed by soil. The vegetables and the herbs grow in volcanic pumice. And then finally, we have a biogas installation in which we turn all the organic waste that we produce into biogas, and that includes obviously some of the water as well. So the point being, we talk about large scale systems, both in terms of recycling water, recycling sewage, or at least treating sewage, and in terms of using the organic waste to create energy. And we talk about large systems, but equally importantly are the small scale systems on individual dwellings, individual offices, and like you said, Mark, for example, hotels. And I didn't know, well, secretly, Veronica, one of my goals was to create soul-crushing jealousy with all my colleagues, and it worked. We've had over 800 people come and visit our systems over the last year and a half, and being invited to sessions like today surprises me every time, because I think we did this because we thought it was the right thing to do. And it was an interesting project, a little bit outside the box. But then you get this kind of recognition from you guys that we've actually done something important. And the more I listen to conferences like this, the more I realize that actually it is actually something impactful that we created. A small scale, nature-based, largely nature-based the solution of taking a whole entity and turning it into a net zero, hopefully one day carbon neutral system, showing that at the level of the individual, you can do this and you have to do it. I mean, you don't have to do the whole thing that we did with all 4 pillars. You can do one or another. You can do you can easily capture your water and reuse all your water. You can quite easily do your vegetable garden or grow your own vegetables, and you can also equally easily do the biogas systems. Solar is a little bit more onerous and a little bit more expensive, although I'm told, and I've just been told, so this is secondhand, that if we were to do the same solar installation today that we did 3 years ago in our embassy, we would only be paying about 20% of what we paid. And that's how that market.
How much, sorry to chime in there, how much was it? How much did it cost?
The whole system, everything, all 4 pillars was about 350,000 euros. Half of that was the electric, so about 170,000 euros for the 2 buildings. 10 people live on our plot, and about 30 people are there during the day. So we run the residence, we run the office on solar energy, and it was about 170,000. You could do it. Apparently, you could do it today for less than 40. The whole system. So even that is evolving and becoming much more accessible. I've spoken too much. Thank you very much.
Oh, that was fantastic. Yeah, no, a huge round of applause. And as somebody who's actually come to visit the Belgium embassy, it's absolutely phenomenal. And I think it was exactly the vision of sewage diplomacy to have these embassies bring in all of this great technology. Yeah, I highly recommend for everyone, if you're in Nairobi, please visit.
Yeah, I think this is just to add a little bit. We're very keen that Peter is not alone. I think we would love it to see when you guys go out there and tell him his system is old-fashioned because you've now got the much better system, and let there be competition between sharing your national expertise, national technologies.
Sure. And so we were, as a follow-up question, so we were talking about small scale. So this question is probably directed a little bit more towards you, Honorable Kibibi. So is it realistic to envision large-scale nutrient and water pipelines connected to cities in agricultural regions, or are decentralized approaches likely to become more effective in the context of Mombasa or in the context of Kenya as a whole?
Okay, come again. You're talking about expanding the water pipelines. Okay, thank you so much. My name is Kibibi Abdallah Hamis. I'm the County Executive Committee member for Environment and Water. That is, I'm the County Minister for Environment and Water. And I'm happy to have joined you today. I've been asked by the governor to come and read his message. But unfortunately, she has ambushed me into this panel. But all in all, these are our day-to-day life activities. Okay, maybe just to give like a history, maybe of Mombasa, the need of our water, and maybe what we currently have, what is the deficiency, and if there is room for expansion and what have you. I can say Mombasa is a coastal city, and our daily need for water is around 240,000 cubic meters. And what we get, as I'm speaking, is just 40,000 cubic meters per day. So we have a deficit of around 200,000 cubic meters of water, simply because we don't have sources of water in Mombasa. We get our water from the neighboring counties, that is Kilifi, Kwale, Taita Taveta, that is where we get our water from. And currently we've just concluded our hydrogeological survey to ascertain if we have these aquifers, the big aquifers, so that we can have our own source of water due to the scarcity. And when I'm talking of the deficit of 200,000 cubic meters, that does not mean that the residents of Mombasa lack water. No, we have other avenues where they get this water from, for instance, the boreholes, and some who live in the interior like Mwakirunge and what have you, they have the streams and what have you. So that at least there are some efforts that the residents have their own ways of ensuring that they get this deficit of 200,000. But as a county government, what we provide is 40,000. And we have plans to increase this to around 80 to 100. And maybe just to add from this, we have the Mwache Dam, that's the national government initiative that is going to ensure that we get more volumes of water to our people. Then maybe to your question, is it feasible if we can expand? And in the context of Mombasa, what strategies have we put in place? That was the question. To move from small scales to large scale. Okay, one, I have said we have plans to have our own aquifers. Those are the deep wells in Mombasa. So when we have this deep well, when we have our own source of water, then as a county government, we are in a position to ensure that we now spread the lines to various people and ensure that we increase the coverage. Then maybe just to add on this, I've talked of the national government initiative, that is the Mwache Dam. The Mwache Dam is going to give us around 120,000 cubic meters of water to Mombasa. But we need to plan for this. If you are getting 40,000 and then all of a sudden, pop, you have 120,000. Without proper planning, we are going to waste this water in NRW. That is the non-revenue water. So we've contacted some stakeholders, some development partners to see how best we will channel these waters into the households of our people and also ensure we reduce the NRW. As we are speaking, we are at 50%. So we are not doing good in Mombasa. Whatever little we are getting, we are losing almost half of it. So we have strategies which we've put in place. We have development partners who've come forward to assist us in the NRW. And in NRW, some are commercial, some due to leakages that we have, due to the old pipes and what have you. So to me, there's urgent need for Mombasa to expand from small scale to large scale and ensure that we supply or we increase the volumes of the lines to reach more people in Mombasa. Thank you.
See, the ambush was necessary. We needed to hear a little bit more about Mombasa and what was happening there. So what technological breakthroughs are needed to make nutrient recovery and redistribution more efficient? And this is probably more towards Mark and Joss.
I'm happy to give it a start. So I'm going to say dewatering. What do I mean by dewatering? So when we get sewage, it's a mix of solids and liquids. And well, first off, the settling of the solids is easy enough. And let's say if you have a septic tank in this hotel, this particular hotel is producing about 200 meter cubed of sewage per day. 200 tons per day is going into 3 different septic tanks in this hotel, and then it's settling. The liquids presently are just tipping over and going into the groundwater, and the solids are taken away. Now, the solids, in this sense, is an easy opportunity because if they're taken away currently to landfill, they could in future be taken away to be doing digestion, anaerobic digestion, produce biogas, and get the nutrients there. And that could be done in an agricultural area, which means that those nutrients are then put straight into agricultural system, ensuring that the technology means there's no microbial, etc., contamination. There is a question for technologies of, is the technology you're doing sufficiently destroying pharmaceutical products and other residues? That is the challenge for circular economy. There's a question about metals, but the discussion I've had with various people is that actually the metal issue is not as big as you might think if you're coming from domestic sewage. So perhaps the pharmaceuticals one is bigger. Now I want to go on to the liquid fraction. If you're a hotel like this and you process your liquid fraction, I mentioned about the lightning in the box method we're working on with the Norwegian company N2 Applied. So they take the solar power that produces a massive spark, the lightning, that splits the air to make ozone and nitrogen oxides. The ozone gets rid of the smell. The nitrate kills the bacteria. So that's great. But what if you've got too much nutrients and you can't use it locally? If the hotel engineer this morning was saying, in fact, they've got a great need for water and nutrients in all the green matter around here. They're importing water in, but they could be recovering it back into all the greenery around the hotel. So that's great. But what if we end up putting, I don't know, 300-400 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare on, which is more than we need? That is the dewatering challenge. So my starting point here is not reverse osmosis because that's too expensive and your purpose there is clean water for drinking. But I'm asking questions, by the way, as a botanist, to the engineers. Is what I call solar distillation an option? I don't mean solar power. I mean simply you run water over a black pipe and you run it in an enclosed environment with cold water going around it. It evaporates, it condenses due to the cold water, and you're ending up separating 2 liquid fractions, one more pure water, one more concentrated water. So that could be a way of concentrating up, and all you need is a cold water supply to encourage the condensation. Is that really the way forward? I don't know. But I think this is the conversation we need to have in the end, which is we don't want to be transporting large amounts of very, very dilute nutrients and water long distances, but let the water be used locally and reduce the input. And if there's not an agricultural need locally, make fertilizer. And when the fertilizer is concentrated enough, that could be sent to places where it can be used more effectively.
Fantastic.
Thank you. It's really exciting to hear about those technologies. I'm going to bring it right back to very rural places, coastal places, and just add as well that there's a bigger role for nature to be used as well. So at the smallest household scale, being able to build small treatment wetlands can be transformative for reducing pollution. And we've been working on some pilots in a few different places, Hawaii, Palau, where we've been building these small called bioreactor gardens that are sort of fed by household septic tank effluent and planted with filled with great sand, bit of biochar, and then using deep-rooted grasses like vetiver to suck out the nitrogen. And they can also be used to grow like food crops, things like trees, obviously not lettuces, but some like breadfruit and things like that to kind of augment the family, bit more money for the families.
Fantastic. And a follow-up, yep, would you like to add something to it? Sure.
Maybe just, I had not talked on the liquid waste. Yeah, that's the last part, maybe just to bring to your attention that currently as we are speaking, all the liquid waste that is generated in Mombasa, most of it is just draining into the ocean. And that is really affecting the ecosystem of the ocean because our local people, their sources of income is fishing. So if we have the liquid waste going into the ocean, that means the livelihoods are affected. So what we are doing as the county government of Mombasa, we've constructed a treatment facility at Kipevu that is in Changamwe to treat this waste. So what we will do, we'll now redirect the liquid waste from the ocean to Kipevu and then further push it or pump it to Mwakirunge. We've set aside some budgetary provision and we are having some development partners who are going to help us put up a treatment plant in Mwakirunge to ensure that the waste is, we make briquettes out of the waste, and also the liquid waste, that is the water after treatment, it can be used for aquaculture, let's say fishing and what have you. Those are the future plans for Mombasa, but as we are speaking, all the waste is going to the ocean. Yeah.
It's good to hear that the Mombasa County is actually doing something about the issue of raw waste into the ocean. So one of the final questions before we open up is what kind of partnerships between governments, researchers, investors, and industry will be required to scale these solutions globally?
Ask a question.
Sure.
Do you need to scale them? How about encouraging small scale?
That's a good start. Joss, do you have anything to add to that?
One of the things that I've noticed is a lot of the funding for wastewater treatment, what are we calling it? Used water, thank you, treatment, is in the kind of sanitation silo. And yet we've talked a lot about the multi-benefits of using this as a resource and using it differently. Protects coastal ecosystems, food sources, can provide water for agriculture. All of these benefits improve climate resilience. And so we're leaving money on the table by not accessing climate and biodiversity finance as well. And one of the things we've been thinking through a little bit is like, how can we better access more streams of capital to be able to get this work done? And one of the things that Valence I mentioned earlier is this sort of typical that we organize around utilities, and yet many people in a country maybe have decentralized systems, and that is organized by housing code. And so developing partnerships across natural resource agencies, as well as sanitation, public health, to really think through sort of resilient systems so that we can actually identify the appropriate solutions for cities as well as for rural areas that can deliver all of these benefits that we see. And other barriers are being able to, we've made the point about the economic case, but really connecting that to country priorities and metrics. And then thinking about how to access other sources of finance through climate, for example. I've seen that we need more technical assistance to help countries understand how to frame these investments as climate resilience and biodiversity investments, as well as sanitation and public health.
Can I make one more point on what you were just saying about how we build resilient systems? One of the things that I noticed with what we built in the embassy was that both on the water side and on the electric side. So Kenya produces 95% of its electricity sustainably. I don't think Kenyans say that enough all over the world, how good they actually are in that. They should. The problem with electricity, with power in Kenya, is your grid, is the strength of your distribution or the weakness of your distribution. The same happens with water. The systems are very old, and there's an incentive. There's a negative incentive actually for consumers to take themselves off the grids, both water and electric. Which of course means, especially on the electric side, it's easier to conceive. If you take a client off the grid, you're actually strengthening the grid because you're taking away one vulnerability. But if you take a client off the grid, that client also doesn't pay the company anymore to use the grid or to use the electricity. So you're taking away revenue from the company to maintain the grid that is already vulnerable. And the same thing happens in water. So I think that's one of the problems that we all have to solve. And that's not just here in Kenya. That's a problem that we have to solve worldwide. If we become more individual in our energy production, in our water use, for example, how do we maintain the systems that allow all of us to use those things? And I think that's an issue that we all have to think about, and not just here and not just in countries like Kenya, but all over the world.
I just wanted to add briefly on this debate about scale, and let's say horses for courses in an English framing, but this means essentially each situation may have a different profile. And I think you give a really good example of the Kenya opportunity. It's great to hear about such a large percentage coming from renewable, and then conversely, the infrastructure. So let's say the solution for a hotel may be different to the solution to a city. A solution for one city is different depending on the city. So I start thinking about Singapore. I mean, I just pick it as a big city, really massive. With the Maldives, I think about Mali. If you would recover the sewage from Mali and it didn't go in the sea, it means you're going to have to do dewatering to make a product that you can sell. So the challenge, I think, on scale and on the exact route is going to depend on the context. What I love to hear, and you mentioned just about briquettes, for example, from solids, we're all learning, and each stage finds a new use and a new application, and we learn from each other about how to get more and more recovery of used water and the solids that go with it.
Fantastic. I think I'd like to open up the floor for any questions as we almost conclude our session. Does anyone have any comments, questions that they'd like to make?
Hi, thank you for the discussion. I know we've talked a lot about sort of technology and resource recovery, circular economy today, but if you ask anyone in the sanitation sector, they'll say that technology is not the problem. It's the broader sort of enabling environment and systems that underpin the sanitation's our ability to access technologies like this. That's where the real sort of challenge is in delivering safe sanitation. So I just wanted to hear sort of, when you were talking about these different examples, how engaging to strengthen the enabling environment can lead towards our ability to adopt and maintain these kinds of technologies.
I want to very briefly say, I fully agree with you. And let's say those logistic challenges, again, are going to be different in each context. And I think, this is something we want to hear from you as water professionals. I'm actually an air guy. Peter says he knows nothing. I also know nothing about water because I'm a botanist who works in air pollution. Why do I do that? Because I noticed the barriers to change and we need to join up and club together. So it means we're all learning. The one, let's say, logistical barrier I hear about is, imagine that sewage works become fertilizer factories. But what about the logistics for supply and the logistics for demand, and people actually want to buy the product and how to get there? So I think there is an awful lot of, as you say, how to get there. And that's where I think governments can play a role in investing, in nudging, in making change. So give an example. I have a conversation with some fertilizer manufacturers. I say, why don't you say that your fertilizer company commits to say that 10% or 20% of your fertilizer is made with recovered nitrogen nutrient sources. It's just like you have with petrol at the moment. E10 means 10% ethanol. So do it with fertilizer and have a market commitment by companies to say, we will be leaders because we've got 10% recovered nutrients, not just fresh made. So I think, whatever the answer is, we need lots of these industry and government pushes that are going to help us overcome the logistic challenges.
Can I tell you a story about logistics? So we have 2,500 people come through my embassy every year in events that we do. And obviously the biogas production the system that we have can't produce enough to cook for 2,500 people in a year. So what we ended up doing, initially we were just recycling and turning our own kitchen waste into the biogas, but we didn't have enough. So we had to go and find somewhere else. And we ended up the store down the road. One day I was standing there buying apples and under the layer of apples that they were selling, there were apples that were starting to rot already and that you knew that they weren't going to sell. So I said, can I have those and turn those into gas in my own biodigesters, please? So we now have a system, a logistics system with a store down the road where we put a big bin and they put all the organic waste in there, and 2-3 times a week we go pick up the bin and we turn that into gas. So that's, again, small scale logistics problem of how you recycle this produce. And you probably have an answer to that question as well.
Well, I think I would just add that workforce development is a really important part of this. And we've been working in Hawaii, where there's a law to replace 83,000 cesspools across the islands. And so because this planning is all happening for the entire state at once, there's been a realization that there needs to be investment in new workforce training. And it creates like a little bit of a chicken and egg as they think through what are the right solutions as well. And so it really does become this kind of system problem where you've got to nudge different pieces forwards all at once, but being able to really invest across, workforce supply chains, thinking through how you can get materials to a place, all of that's really important.
Obviously, the example you've given at the Belgium embassy is very interesting. My question to any of the panels is are there any grants that can support, for example, if the county government of Mombasa wanted to put up a sewage treatment plant, and there were no investors who are coming in, are there any companies or governments that would offer a grant or some sort of incentives? I've also heard about some technology that would also be able to, apart from the fertilizer in the treatment plant, is to produce power so that they could use the sewage, treat it, and produce power, and the power could be sold to the national grid. Are there any, do you have any examples of such sewage plants that could also produce power? Thank you.
Can I turn the question around? Is there any way that Mombasa County or any other county could develop, conceptualize a system that would attract international investors into these systems rather than grants? Make it worth our company's while to come and invest here in water recycling, sewage recycling, sustainable energy. Make it worth our while and you'll get investors. And oh, by the way, we in government, if you look at the landscape today of the development landscape, USAID closing down, Germany, France, Belgium, Netherlands, Denmark, Sweden, reducing their budget, their aid budgets by substantive and statistically significant amounts. We are inevitably turning our development cooperation towards concessional financing of investments. Africa Forward conference a couple of weeks ago in Nairobi, President Macron and President Ruto made that point. We're looking for partnerships, we're looking for investments, we're looking to add value here. Well, adding value here means making those systems worth our investors' while. So rather than, excuse me, I'm going to be very blunt, rather than asking for a grant, make it worth our while to come and invest. Thank you.
I'm going to add just a tiny bit and not disagree with that at all. Yeah, I'm a scientist. I like grants, but we realize that we've got to mobilize change, and you don't mobilize long-term change with just grants. So that means that where there is still granting, this is looking towards a pathway of a transition towards that. Famous phrases of blended finance or whatever. That hierarchy. So that, yeah. Okay, but let us say it depends on which sector you're in and which action. So some actions are way beyond that, and maybe the answer is others who are still earlier need to learn from them, learn that game. But I've been enjoying my conversations this week with Caleb Issoe, who's hiding at the back and probably embarrassed that I raised him. But he's a finance guy. We're having these conversations between finance guys and scientists and learning between each other. And I guess, back to your point, bring in the partners who have those different expertise that can make that transition.
I think you asked about if there were models of creating power. There's an organization called Sanovation. She probably Mila can speak to this better. I'm not sure of the scale of which their solutions work, but they turn fecal sludge into biogas, and I can send you connections if you like.
Well, I think that concludes our session. But before that, I would like, in the interest of time, a very brief final remark from each of our panelists on, we've spoken about technology, we've spoken about, how much it all costs to bring in these systems. So what do you think, or what's something that you believe needs to be done from here on out to allow for the success of sewage diplomacy?
Okay, in a nutshell, what I can say is we need to build synergies. So we need to work together to ensure that we move from traditional ways of disposing waste, especially the used waters and the liquid waste, and we go to the technologies, we employ them. That is, let's see how we can use liquid waste to generate power, how we can use liquid waste to make other products like what I've mentioned earlier, like the briquettes and what have you, and also the used water, how they can benefit the society. So as government, as development partners, as wananchi, the local people, let's build synergy, let's work together towards transforming waste management efforts. Thank you.
Yeah, I think for me, every event that we do seeds some new ideas in us, not just those on the panel, because we are learning just as much as you. We're all learning. So the question I have is, what are those seeds which we go away and want to water carefully with our used water in our minds and turn into reality? So for me, I've really so far enjoyed my starter conversations with two of the engineers at this hotel. We want to continue that and somehow work out how we can go forward. And of course, we're interested in partners, but we would love to see this not just be a talk shop and we go away, but how can we seed things in ourselves, which means we change our actions and our time going forward?
We need the big projects. Absolutely. We need to have projects at the scale of a city or a county or even a country. But the big projects don't work without the small ones. We need to incentivize the individual dwellings, businesses, offices, if we want to make it work. Because if you just look at the big stuff, two things. Number one, it's the big stuff is probably too local, and can't cover everybody. And secondly, it doesn't instill the mindset that we're all in this climate change fight together. Thank you.
Thank you. I think what we're doing here is creating a common vision for how we can create benefit from reusing water and waste. And I think that's how we really start to get change, is by all coming together around the same vision. A colleague at the Ocean Sewage Alliance here is working on to establish a global sewage treaty. And so that might be one way for us all to come together and some of the frameworks for how we can actually start to tackle this issue and create a benefit for people.
Fantastic. And I think I would like to thank the panelists, our online audience, and all of you all. But before we conclude, we would actually like to present an award to someone that Mark is going to explain a little bit more about. So I'll pass the mic to Mark.
Okay, so Peter, you told us you don't know anything about it, and yet I think he's proved otherwise. And you've made a difference. We started sewage diplomacy discussions in, I don't know, 2025. You'd already implemented your system by 2023. You've come here today, and we want to, award you the first ever sewage diplomacy award as our ambassador for sewage. And we'd love to have a 2027 award, a 2028 award, etc. But for you, Peter, thank you so much for making a difference. This is actually
Right, so that concludes our session. We're going to have a short break. Please feel free to continue the conversation. Some of our panelists will be sticking around for a short while. We've also got tea, coffee, and a little bit of snacks outside before we begin our second session. So thank you all for attending, and we really hope that you've taken a lot out of this conversation, sewage diplomacy. Thank you.